China suspends special port fees for U.S. chips for 1 year. Economy Minister Reich warns Germany faces structural crisis and calls for major reforms. And Suez Canal Authority Chairman Rabia says revenues to hit $4.2 billion, up 7.6% from last year.
Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully take office of President of the United States.
Capital open the emergence and reciprocity.
Mexico, Canada,
Greenland.
Welcome to the Economic Bulletin with me, Halal Hamalawi, and we start off with the tariff policy. As the Ministry of Transport has announced that China has suspended special port fees for U.S.-owned or operated ships for 1 year. The move, effective immediately, follows recent trade talks in Kuala Lumpur. Simultaneously, China will pause its probe into U.S. measures affecting Chinese shipping and shipbuilding. The reciprocal suspensions signal a de-escalation in trade tensions between the two economic powers. China's Commerce Ministry has stated that Beijing has suspended its ban on exports of gallium, germanium, and antimony to the United States, easing restrictions following talks between President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping. The suspension, effective until November 27, 2026, lifts the ban imposed last December, but exporters must still obtain licenses from Beijing. The metals are vital for semiconductors, fiber optic cables, and defense materials. China also suspended stricter checks on dual-use graphite exports to the U.S., though a ban on sales to U.S. military users remains in place. Supply chain firm Qnews has reported that U.S. container imports fell 7.5% year-over-year in October, with shipments from China dropping 16.3% amid ongoing trade policy uncertainty. American ports handled 2.3 million 20-foot equivalent units, below typical peak season levels, while Chinese imports rose 5.4% from September. Categories including furniture, toys, and electrical machinery saw sharp annual declines. Industry analysts project further import declines through year-end, citing well-stocked inventories and shifted trade patterns. Recent U.S.-China trade agreements may help stabilize import levels in the coming months. San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly attributes slowing U.S. job growth primarily to weaker demand for workers rather than reduced labor supply from immigration restrictions. She noted monthly payroll growth has fallen from 150,000 in 2024 to around 50,000 this year. Daly pointed to slowing wage growth as evidence businesses need fewer workers, stating that demand for workers has fallen, coinciding with labor supply changes. While not commenting on December rate action, she observed the Fed has appropriately reduced borrowing costs and must now balance inflation risks against potential AI productivity gains. The U.S. Senate has advanced a measure to end the 40-day government shutdown, passing a key procedural vote 60-40. The deal funds the government through January 30 and sets up a December vote on extending Affordable Care Act subsidies. The breakthrough follows the longest shutdown in U.S. history, which prolonged workers, disrupted food assistance, and caused flight cancellations. The measure now returns the House before heading to President Trump's desk.
The sum is we are closer to the possibility.
In remarks about the potential end to the government shutdown, President Donald Trump declared that he would not approve any substantial money for what he described as prisoners or illegals, asserting that Democrats understood his position.
Well, it looks like we're getting very close to the shutdown. We'll never agree to give any substantial money or any money to really prisoners, illegals that come into our country. And I think the Democrats understand that. And it looks like we're getting close to the shutdown ending. You'll know very soon. Thank you very much.
U.S. airlines have canceled over 2,800 flights and delayed more than 10,200 on Sunday, marking the highest single-day disruption since the federal government shutdown began 40 days ago. The travel chaos stems from government-mandated flight reductions and rising air traffic controller absences, as thousands of federal employees continue working without pay. Delta Airlines was particularly affected, with 52% of its mainline flights canceled or delayed. The disruptions come during a critical travel period ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday, raising concerns about further impacts as the record-long shutdown continues to strain the nation's air travel system. For further analysis, we're joined from Washington by American author and chairman of Links Investment Advisory, Mr. Peter Tanos. Welcome to Qnews. Always a pleasure having you, Mr. Tanos. Now, how significant is the Senate's vote to end the 40-day U.S. government shutdown for economic stability? If you remember, a few days ago, we discussed this issue. You were a little bit optimistic about it.
Hello, Hala. It's nice to be with you as always.
Always a pleasure.
The Senate measure to open the government is obviously very, very important. But now it has to be passed by the House. And one little problem is that the House is not in session. Speaker Mike Johnson now has to call the House back into session in order to get a vote to reopen the government, which the president will surely sign. So the next step we're looking for is for Speaker Johnson to call the House back in session. Bottom line, all this could happen this week.
Okay, so what impact has the record-long shutdown had on U.S. growth, consumer confidence, and federal operations as well?
Well, it certainly had a terrible effect on Americans' perception of how the U.S. government operates. I mean, this has been a massive failure of government to get together and arrive at a solution. As we pointed out the other day when we spoke, interestingly, the Republicans seem to be getting most of the blame when it's the Republicans who proposed a clean continuing resolution to open the government, and the Democrats put a condition on it. But that may be changing, and it may provoke a dramatic shift where the Republicans and the Democrats are going to get equal blame. Let me just add another thing. I think the big impetus to get this solved now is the disruption of air travel because the air travel controllers are not getting paid.
Exactly. That was my common question to you, Mr. Tanos, because with airlines canceling thousands of flights, How deep are the shutdown's effects on the travel and transport sectors, especially that the Thanksgiving is approaching soon?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Hala, and you just said it. I mean, the fact is that the Thanksgiving holiday is the one of the two largest travel periods in the United
With
States.
Christmas, yes.
Exactly, with Christmas. Now, you can imagine the disruption this would cause and the reaction by the public if a majority of airline flights were canceled. This alone is a big incentive for the government to get its act together and end the shutdown.
Yes, I think that's more important to agree on a solution now rather than who gets the blame. But could the temporary funding deal through January 30 prevent another disruption early next year?
Yeah, it could. I mean, and this is the right way to approach it. I mean, open the government for a short period of time so the Democrats can put forward their bill, what the Republicans have said they will let them do. Debate the bill on the Medicare insurance payments, come to a solution to that, and then you can have a more permanent opening. You can have a more permanent opening of the government that goes beyond January. We have to be optimistic that they know they can't let this happen again because it is too destructive and everybody's going to get the blame as they should.
Yes. So, how could continued political uncertainty, including the government shutdown, influence U.S. hiring, wages, and inflation as well?
Yeah. Well, obviously, with the government being shut down has a negative effect on the economy because, as I'm sure you know, two-thirds of the American economy is consumer spending. And with a government shutdown and millions of people not getting paid, the that has a direct effect on government on consumer spending. But in the meantime, the Federal Reserve has a meeting in December where they're expected to lower interest rates again. But again, they don't have the data from the government because it's shut down on which to base these decisions. So you
Oh,
can see what a mess this is.
yes. Well, San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly said that slower job growth reflects weaker demand for workers. How does that align with current hiring and wage data?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Hala? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Yes, I'm going to repeat my question to you again, sir. I was asking you about the statements by San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly, or Daly. She said that slower job growth reflects weaker demand for workers. How does that align with current hiring and wage data?
Yeah, so the weaker demand for workers is a sign of a slowing of the economy. And obviously, this is what if the unemployment rate goes up, as it well might, that will be a negative, that will be a big negative, and it will hurt the administration. But it is not likely that the unemployment rate is going to increase substantially. Generally, employment has been pretty steady, so that is not an immediate concern as we look to the next couple of months.
Mr. Thanos, what are the Fed's key challenges in balancing inflation control with supporting employment as growth cools?
Yeah, Hala, you just mentioned there are two mandates. It's economic growth and employment. The
Exactly.
problem is always economic growth without inflation is what is desired, or as the Fed puts it, it wants no more than a 2% inflation number. What is coming up lately is that that 2% number is starting to look antiquated and not realistic. Many economists now today say that we can live very happily with inflation of 2.5 or 3%, and that the Fed should change its objective in that regard, because it may be very difficult to get back to 2% inflation. So these are some of the challenges you're talking about.
Let's talk about China. Now, China has suspended special port fees for U.S. ships and lifted its export ban on key metals. How might these steps ease trade tensions between the U.S. and China?
Oh, it's a big improvement. China's been a very smart negotiator. They know how to play hardball, just the way Trump does, and Trump respects that. The two big issues confronting the United States were importing rare earth materials, which are very much needed in a variety of American industries, notably the
AI?
automobile industry and defense. The
Yes.
other issue the other issue is the fact that China suspended imports of soybeans from American farmers.
Mm.
China is the largest importer of American soybeans.
Mm.
And that had an effect on Trump's base in the Midwest, where most of the farms are, and most of them were Republican Trump supporters. So
I
he had to
see.
do something about that, and that's why this new agreement is working.
Okay, I see now. Well, what impact could the resumption of gallium, germanium, and antimony exports, rare earth minerals, as you said, have on U.S. high-tech and defense industries? You just mentioned defense industries. I was talking about the AI as well.
Yeah, well, obviously, the defense industries are the largest discretionary item of spending in the United States government. We spend $1 trillion a year on defense. And by the way, let me mention incidentally, the expense we have that is greater than the defense spending is interest on the debt, which is something we can talk about another time because it's a pretty big topic.
Yes, please.
But
Interested to know, yes. Yes.
yeah, but go ahead, Hala.
Well, I guess that's all for me for now. But yes, we need to continue that discussion in another episode. But from now, I'd like to thank you so much from Washington. That was American author and chairman of Link's Investment Advisory,
Always a
Mr.
pleasure.
Peter Tans. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you with us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the latest developments from the rest of the world. Stay tuned. Moving on to Europe, where Economy Minister Katharina Reich has declared that Germany is mired in a structural crisis and must undertake sweeping reforms to regain international competitiveness. In a keynote Berlin speech, she ruled out a quick return to export-led growth and called for state modernization, fewer business regulations, tighter debt controls, and market-oriented energy policies, while acknowledging that planned infrastructure and defense spending would provide some economic momentum. Reich emphasized that deeper structural changes are essential. She highlighted that German firms pay up to 5 times more for gas than U.S. competitors, underscoring the urgency of reform. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has announced that Germany will introduce a 3-year industry power price subsidy starting in 2026 to protect its steel sector. The plan aims to lower electricity costs that threaten the industry's viability and requires EU state aid approval. The government also called for EU policy changes, including stronger measures against dumped imports and reforms to the carbon border adjustment mechanism to cover downstream steel products. Finance Minister Lars Hilgebel said that Germany's steel strategy will focus on transitioning to climate-friendly production.
Darüber gibt es in der Bundesregierung Konsens. Ich habe das auch mit dem
Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has indicated that Britain's Labour government may need to raise taxes to avoid deep cuts in capital spending, signalling a potential break from its manifesto pledge not to increase taxes on working people. Reeves said that sticking strictly to the campaign promise would require harmful spending reductions, acknowledging that she is preparing both tax and spending measures for her November 26th budget. Her comments suggest that the government is prioritizing fiscal targets over election promises as it faces pressure to improve living standards amid declining poll numbers.
By simply reclassifying areas like defence or education. But no accounting trick can change the basic fact that government debt is sold on financial markets. There are limits on the price.
Ukraine's Deputy Finance Minister Alexander Kava said on Monday that the country faces a more challenging financial situation in 2026 than this year, citing uncertainty over how to cover a substantial budget shortfall. Kava revealed that Ukraine has an unfunded gap of approximately $60 billion for 2026-2027 and confirmed that Kiev remains in talks with international partners about securing the necessary funding. The statement highlights Ukraine's ongoing fiscal pressures amid continued economic disruption from the war. Moving on to Asia, China's producer price deflation eased and consumer prices rose 0.2% in October, marking a return to inflation after 2 months of decline. Official data showed on Sunday that the PPI fell 2.1% year-on-year, while core inflation climbed to a 20-month high of 1.2%. Analysts say that the figures reflect improving supply-demand balance, but warn that deflation risks persist. Beijing's efforts to cut overcapacity and stabilize industries appear to be working. Yet, economists say that more policy support may be needed to sustain growth near the 5% target. Official data has revealed that India's unemployment rate declined to 5.2% in the July-September quarter, down from 5.4% in the previous 3 months. The decrease was driven by increased rural employment during the farming season and improved female workforce participation. Rural unemployment fell to 4.4% from 4.8%, while urban unemployment edged up to 6.9%. The overall labor force participation rate improved to 55.1%, with female participation rising to 33.7%. The worker population ratio also increased to 52.2%, supported by growth in self-employment in rural areas and modest gains in urban salaried employment. Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi announced plans to replace the country's annual fiscal consolidation target with a multi-year framework, a move signaling a shift towards more flexible spending to stimulate economic growth. The new fiscal goal, which will be developed by her cabinet starting in January, would extend over several years and replace the current primary budget surplus target. This could ease pressure from Japan's massive public debt. Takaichi also reiterated her call for the Bank of Japan to maintain low interest rates, emphasizing the need for appropriate monetary policy to achieve sustainable inflation. South Korea's export reached a record $185 billion in the third quarter, rising 6.5% year-on-year, driven by strong semiconductor shipments amid an AI sector boom. The Ministry of Data and Statistics reported that semiconductor-led capital goods jumped 11.2%, while auto exports to Europe helped consumer goods end a 4-quarter decline. Both large and medium-sized companies achieved record exports, highlighting the chip sector's key role in driving growth despite ongoing trade uncertainties. Thailand's Board of Investment has approved 4 data center projects worth $3.1 billion, including a major hyperscale facility, as part of efforts to accelerate foreign and domestic investment. The projects include an 84-megawatt data center by Dubai's Damak Digital and a 200-megawatt hyperscale facility by a local investor. The board also introduced new measures to expedite $9.2 billion in stalled investments by streamlining power access, land allocation, and visa approvals. The BOI chief said that the approvals and regulatory improvements aim to strengthen investor confidence and support employment and economic growth. Back home, the chairman of the Suez Canal Authority, SCA, Osama Rabia, said that the canal's revenues are expected to close the current year at approximately $4.2 billion, up from $3.9 billion in the previous year. He described the performance as a real beginning of gradual recovery in international maritime transit through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, following a period of slowdown driven by security tensions in the region. Rabia noted that the past few months have seen a notable rebound in traffic, with the number of vessels transiting the canal rising 16% in October on an annual basis, while the dollar-dominated revenues grew by 17% year-on-year. The CEO of the General Authority for Investment and Free Zones, GAFI, Mr. Hussein Hiba, said that the strong demand from Chinese companies to invest in Egypt has been a key driver behind the government's decision to expand existing free zones and establish 4 new ones. The new zones will be located in the 10th of Ramadan City, New October City, New Burj Al Arab, and New Alamein City, and are expected to begin operations by the end of 2026. Hiba made the remarks during the first Egyptian-Chinese Investment Forum, which brought together representatives of about 200 Egyptian and Chinese companies. And still in Egypt, where Cairo has invited Gulf investors to deepen their involvement in the country's economy, particularly in priority sectors offering mutual benefits. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli addressed the Egyptian Gulf Trade and Investment Forum, emphasizing Egypt's commitment to strengthening economic ties with Gulf Cooperation Council members. Madbouli highlighted Egypt's ongoing development drive, including state investments in infrastructure, new urban projects, and modern transport networks. He noted the country has built over 20 new smart cities, including the new administrative capital and New Alamein City, all developed with sustainability and advanced infrastructure standards. The Statistical Center for the GCC Stat, has reported that the pace of economic growth in Gulf Cooperation Council countries is expected to accelerate in the coming years, reaching 4.3% by 2027. The projection is supported by planned investments in tourism, renewable energy, manufacturing, and technology sectors. The report indicated that GCC economies recorded a real GDP growth rate of approximately 1.9% in 2024, with non-oil sectors growing by 4.4%. This performance occurred amid ongoing global economic challenges and reflects continued implementation of economic diversification strategies across the region. And Dubai's economy has expanded by 4.4% in the first half of 2025, reaching 241 billion dirham. A strong performance across key sectors underscored the Emirates' continued economic momentum. The second quarter growth accelerated to 4.7%, reaching 122 billion dirham. The human health and social work sector recorded the highest growth at 20%, contributing significantly to overall GDP expansion. Construction also showed robust growth at 8.5%, while real estate, transportation, and financial services all posted solid gains. And that brings us to the end of our economic bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. China suspends special port fees for U.S. ships for 1 year. Economy Minister Reich warns Germany faces structural crisis and calls for major reforms. And Suez Canal Authority Chairman Rabia says that revenues to hit $4.2 billion, up 7.6% from last year. And this concludes our economic bulletin. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to always stay informed. I'm Halal Hamilawi. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. More updates will come your way here on Q News.